Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about some of the most interesting things that we saw at this past week's NAB show in New York. We're right close to it. We're just outside of Trenton in New Jersey, so it was an easy trip up for us. And we got to spend a lot of time walking around, talking with vendors, and actually catching up with some old friends that we haven't seen for a while. So it was a great show, and we want to bring you some of the things that we thought were most interesting. Uh, Keep in mind a few things here is that probably more ended up on the cutting floor than actually is going to make it into the show. There were tons of things that we actually were interested in. Also, everything that we are going to be talking about, this isn't in any particular ranking order, like from best to worst or anything. These are just things that we saw that we thought were really useful or interesting to people in the live streaming space. So we'll be talking about that here today. But before we get into the show, I just want to remind everybody that, as usual, we will be taking video callers. If anybody'd like to come and join us on the show, uh, it would be great if you had any questions about specific products that we are talking about here, or if you have specific things that you've been looking at that are sort of new and emerging technologies that you think we should be paying attention to. Please join us here on air. Just follow us on the link below that will get you into the studio and we can get you on to join us. Also, comments always are welcome. So if you'd like to join us and ask questions that way, we'd love to have you be part of the show. All right. So to get started, we're going to first look at a couple of things that we saw in the camera space. There were lots of camera gear represented in the show. Uh, and we really wanted to just focus on a couple of things that we thought brought unique spins into the space. So the two vendors we saw and spent time with were JVC and Panasonic. So let's start with JVC. So JVC had a range of cameras that we thought really were interesting, specifically around their streaming and communication capabilities. The first camera they had was something called the HM250. Now, the HM250 is an upgrade to a camera they had before called the HM200. Uh, that older camera had a more compressed recording format. This new camera actually has 422 8-bit color space recording. It's 4K and 1080. It has HDMI and SDI out. So SDI is only for 1080 and below. HDMI can handle any of the resolutions. But the thing that we thought was most interesting about this specific camera is the fact that it does live streaming directly from the camera. So if you wanted to connect to Facebook or YouTube, this has a USB port that you can hook up either a wireless adapter to or a cellular adapter to, and use that to connect to your streaming provider. So the interesting thing is it works with YouTube in a more traditional way. In Facebook, it actually uses their new streaming device interface where what you need to do is basically enter a key code where you tell Facebook, I'm going to stream to you with the device. They'll give you like a 6-digit key code, and you can enter that key code uh, and have the two devices connect. So it's really, really powerful way to connect without having to try to copy, stream keys and other very long sequences of encoded digits. So this gives you a real easy way to connect. Uh, it also supports RTMP. So it's something that you could stream to any generic service using this as well. And that also means you could do things like the RTMP mini server and actually use it to stream from a remote location into a studio. So lots of flexibility packaged into what is really a very small handheld. This is something that you could just take easily in two hands and hold up to use. So great for more ENG, more run and gun, more walking a conference floor, ideal for that type of setup. Uh, the price for this is actually under $2,000. So it's something that really in the camera range of things that would do, 4K. This is 4K 30, just to be clear, 4K 422, 8-bit. This is actually very good pricing, and from a real name brand. So this is definitely a camera that I think would be interesting to you guys to check out if this was something you were looking for. The other thing that we saw at the booth was what they called their connected cams. It's a series of cameras that they've come out with. I believe there are three in the series right now that allow you to, like this lower end HM250, it allows you to use wireless connections to stream out to different wireless to different remote sources, whether that's uh, a Facebook or a YouTube, or actually back to a studio. This also has you know, a, a Cat6 connector, so it's something that you could plug in physically as well as just use wireless. The model we're looking at here, the HC550, has a built-in wireless interface. You can sort of see in the back of the picture the two antennas. So this gives you both a physical and a wireless way to connect if you wanted to stream to any of these sources. This camera is much higher end now, as opposed to the HM250, which has about a third of an inch sensor. This camera has a 1-inch sensor. So that's going to give you a lot more control in terms of the pictures that you can actually pull off of it. It should have better depth of field and better low light. It also, because the camera is sort of a higher end, it now records in 4K 60, not just 4K 30, and records in 10-bit, not just 8-bit. So this could be ideal for anybody doing chroma key work or anything like that that would require that additional color bit depth. So very, very cool camera on the specs front. The other thing, though, that we thought was really, really exciting about this camera is that it can record to the higher end formats it has using an SSD. And what it has is a small case that you plug into the camera that uses an M2 SSD. So this means I can put a 2 terabyte SSD into this camera and record directly onto that. Uh, there are two sort of flavors of this camera. There's a lower end model called the HC500, uh, which from a camera spec does all the same things. It's just some of the added features that are left off. So, for example, the HC550 has the ability to put graphic overlays that you can control from a web browser on the actual stream you're either sending or what you're recording. So this means that you could use this in a sports setting. If you were sort of a one camera shoot at a sports game, you could do something, which put up team graphics scores, other things for that. Uh, the other things that this has deal more with the streaming side. So this has higher end quality of service capabilities for streams that you can send out of it. It also has a built-in wireless component. The 500 has a USB port that you can plug a wireless adapter into. So again, these are a step up in the JVC line from the HM250, but these all now fall in a sort of a price gradient. So you start with the $2,000 uh, HM250. The HC500 is about 3,600, and then the HC550 is about 5,000. So you're dealing with, these are all professional grade cameras, but significant jumps in capability, especially, when you look at the sensor size and what that gives you. But definitely, if you're in the camera space, and you're looking for different cameras, these are definitely should make your short list to at least investigate. The other camera that we wanted to talk about that we saw when we were there was was from Panasonic. Now, Panasonic has come out with a lot of great cameras in the past, and really were trailblazers in different types of recording media and HD camera production. So the CX350 is another one of these sort of trailblazing types of cameras. What makes this different is that internally it has NDI HX baked into it. Now, it requires a separate license for that. So it's like a $300 license that you'd need to get to bring this camera up to sort of NDI HX streaming. But the fact that in a single unit where you don't have to have an external converter, you can have a full NDI signal going into your production is pretty attractive. This camera is 4K, 422, 10 bits, so the same basic video specs that you had on the JVC cameras, but it does have this NDI element as well as the ability to stream to other services as well. But this NDI is probably the big differentiator here. The price range for this camera is about 3,500. It's probably about another 300 added onto that for the NDI. So all in with NDI, this would still come in under $4,000. The one caveat I would make is not specifically about this camera, but it's making sure that if you're getting it for the NDI HX, you may want to make sure that whatever components they have here, whatever firmware they're using and hardware they're using for this, will be upgradable if, and I'm assuming it's more when than if, but if NDI-HX evolves with 4.0 to be a 4K compliant spec as well. So that would be something, if NDI is the main driver for getting this camera, that would be something just to keep in the back of your mind to make sure you're future-proofed with this as an option. So again, this is really all I want to talk. There were so many cameras out on the show floor. Uh, a lot of them certainly drawer worthy, but they fall well outside most people's available wallet space. So these are ones, though, that I think if you're in this space professionally and focusing on live streaming, they bring a lot to the table. So we wanted to make sure we got all of these in. So the next thing we saw, which I think is, if you're like me, you've been shipping gear around in a lot of these hard shell cases that have that pick and pluck foam. Uh, that works great, quick and dirty. Got to get something out, got to move it around. But if this is something that you're using day in, day out, to pull gear in and out of all the time on the road, you know how ratty it can become with little chunks falling out and things getting sort of broken because there's too much pressure with with too small a space between them and the foam. So we are always like, gee, it's great when you get a box that actually is made for the gear that you actually want to put in it. And that's where we saw at this company called My Case Builder. So what My Case Builder will do is they will let you buy either just the foam or foam and cases that are cut out on a custom basis for your gear. And the way they do that, I'm sorry, the shot is a little blurry on the left, but they have a web-based design application that you can go on when you want to order, and you can actually create the cutout footprint that you want, both in terms of the outline, but also in terms of the depth. So you get something that will match your gear exactly. And when that ships to you, it now comes as sort of fully clean cut out, solid foam inserts that work in cases you already have or can be shipped with cases that they sell. And they support all the main brands of hard shell case. So this shouldn't be something that you'd have trouble matching up with the gear you have. But just something that resonated with us, and it may resonate with some of you as well, because we know what it's like to deal with ratty cases that have seen a little too much love over the years. Okay, the next company we ran into is called Graphics Outfitters. So a lot of you may know them. They work in sort of the graphic space in general around video production, and a lot of it dealing with the sports arena. The thing that we saw that they had was a replay system. Uh, this is interesting in and of itself. So the replay capabilities they have in this system will allow you to take up to 8 cameras that can now all be, captured as you want to go back in time and grab something for a replay. You can use those cameras to build sort of playlists that you may want to use to do either a halftime rundown during a show or to go back and build other types of post-show compilations that could be used. So all of the things that you'd normally expect in a replay system, they have here, and it's really impressive when you see it in action. They also work with NDI, so they can take NDI feeds in and send NDI feeds out for the replay. One of the nice things, they can also work with SDI, so it's both. The NDI is in addition to the traditional broadcast interfaces they would have. The other thing that we think when we saw this that was interesting is that they allow you to bridge between the two, so you can use NDI outputs or NDI inputs from cameras and bring that into is the Go NDI enabled? Chris, so Chris Burgos just put up a question. He's asking about is Go NDI enabled? I don't really know the system in detail. It's not something I've used, so this is probably something that I couldn't answer specifically, but it does work with both NDI and with SDI. So definitely something that would integrate in traditional as well as all IP production environments. The one of the nice things that this allows is it can work with both things like Blackmagic Gear as well as TriCasters. So you can deal with components that are sitting in both spaces. It also, because it controls sort of what is being streamed out, it allows you to do interesting things where you can change the overlays and downstream keys based on whether you're in replay, playing back something from replay, or in the production, uh, the live production. So that was very interesting. But the reason that they made the list here that I think is definitely really cool is they have a component to this replay system that was designed specifically for teams to use that need to review a play if they want to challenge it. So in a lot of sports today, you have the ability, if you have a call on the field, as one of the teams to challenge whether that call was made correctly. And in order to do that, because there's penalties if you challenge a play and you're found wrong, in order to do that, you need typically to look at replays of those plays and see whether what you think happened actually happened. They have another unit that works with their replay system that's designed for booth replay, where they can show every single angle that they had available, and they have a magnifying glass capable unit, so they can zoom in. They can pick an angle and zoom in on any part of that video to see if something, if their foot was out of bounds or if the ball actually touched the ground. Things that you'd look for in these plays. And that's now built in as one of the options. So this could be something if you're doing your live streamings in the sports field, that could be a value add that you could bundle into your services. So definitely look at what Graphics Outfitters is doing here and see if that could fit in. They're also typically priced around, the markets, which is going to be high school and sort of Division 1 down college sports. So they probably have something that would be more budget friendly for you as well. So give them a give them a check out and see if it could fit for you. But we thought it was pretty interesting. So the next thing that we saw, which jumped at us, was from a company called Padcaster. Now, Padcaster makes a full range of uh, streaming products that are designed for mobile devices. iPads, iPhones, different types of mobile phones. And they have things that do everything from lenses to different gear for carrying them around and stabilizing them. But the thing that we saw that we thought was really interesting was a mini teleprompter called, I believe it's called the Parrot teleprompter. So this fits on the front of a DSLR camera, and you can use your phone as the screen with the text that you're going to use for prompting. And it allows you in a small type of event where you have somebody that may be holding a camera in front of you as you talk at a trade show, you can now have a script and run against that script as you are uh, as you're talking. This is the sort of thing where it's so portable, so small. I could see this becoming a staple of anybody who does that type of quick remote production or news things where you need to stand in front of an event that just happened and talk about it. Something you can quickly put notes together and then use those notes as you talk on camera. Definitely very cool. The folks from Tadcast, we spent a little time talking with them. So hopefully we can actually get them to come on the show and talk about their full range of products, because I think, as I've often said, the best camera you have is the one you have with you when you need to film something. So the fact that they have this type of gear that is easy to move around with you and could easily sit in a backpack could give you a lot of mileage out of that camera that's always in your pocket. So hopefully we can get them on the show later this year to talk about the full range of what they do. So the next thing is we got to spend some time at the Magewell booth, and we were specifically looking at the converters that Magewell has available for their NDI to SDI and NDI HDI line of products. So they have they have encoders that are called their Plus line. Uh, it was funny when we were talking with uh, their representative in the booth. He kept talking about their Plus line as being the devices which have the little Nissan type car badge emblazoned on the top. And I thought it was funny because there is a very strong similarity when you see it. But these are their higher end devices. They tend to be more full featured. But the things that we saw, I mean, they have a standard HD, they have 4K devices. But the thing we thought that was really cool with the way these devices work is that you can configure them fully using a web browser. You connect to the device with the browser, you can name the device, set up all the parameters you want, and get the device fully configured all across the network. They power over Ethernet, so you don't need any additional power. So this whole thing, the power over Ethernet, as well as the configuration, and all of this being driven around NDI, makes these sort of great utility devices. They have things that go from SDI and HDMI to NDI. But the other thing, which is great, is they also have decoders, things that will go from NDI and go out HDMI or SDI. So those types of use cases, I think this is one of their devices here. Uh, these types of devices would be perfect for anything with signage, things that we've talked about a few shows ago, where you could just stick this on the back of a monitor and drive it from any system that you may have on your network. So these converters we think are great. There's a broad lineup. There are a lot of converters in the market. So BirdDog also has a full range of converters working both 4K and HD. They have decode and encode baked into them. They have tally, other things. So there's a broad set of converters in the market, in addition to the ones that NewTek provides directly, where they've just expanded their line of Spark converters. So this is a segment of the market that is starting to grow, and I think it's going to be really valuable for everybody as you are in these hybrid environments, to keep in mind that you will probably need some of these converters with you in your bag of tricks that you take when you do live productions on site. Uh, the other thing is we will have this December, we're trying to finalize the schedule, but we will have Bird Dog come on the show to talk about their range of converters and their cameras. All of those devices, both from Magewell and BirdDog, are full NDI. Uh, Most of the devices offered by NewTek are also full NDI. So there's sort of real room in this marketplace now for these different products to find their niches. And so definitely for all of us that are working in these hybrid worlds, this is a class of device to keep in mind. We just got the chance to spend some time with Magewell to talk about this. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about, I want to go in a little bit more detail on this vendor, is Studio Network Solutions. So Studio Network Solutions, you'd probably call them somewhere between a network attached storage and a media asset management solution. So they have systems that basically have multiple drive bays that connect to the network and allow you to manage files that you'd use in your productions. Uh, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool converters. Yeah, Chris Burgos just mentioned that the converters looked awesome. There are a lot of cool converters that are actually on the market now. Not the least of which is the ones from from NewTek as well. So I think all of these, first, they're a lot smaller than most people realize. I mean, they are really like something that's under, an inch thick, 2.5 by 5 inches. So very small, very, very easily attached to devices like cameras or the backs of monitors. Uh, but a lot of good quality stuff in the market right now in that space. And a lot of it now is full NDI. So you get the top quality that you can out of any of the conversions that you're doing with these devices. So the Studio Network Solutions, they have a lineup of products called their Evo line. The one I want to talk to here is the Evo 8 bay line. NewTek also has a badged version of this that they've probably done some of their own magic sauce to, but the power inside these units is really impressive. The the first point is that they do traditional media asset management functionality. You can store any video, audio, image assets and tag them all. So it would be very easy to find assets as you're assembling your shows that you want to do. Because it has such in-depth tagging, it would be very easy to find assets on the fly. So if somebody were talking about something during a show and you had a video clip from something that happened in the past that was directly relevant, with tagging, it should be very easy to find that. But what makes this so powerful is once you find it, they have a whole range of NDI enabled channels that you can send it out to. So, in addition to being media uh, asset management, you actually become effectively a DDR that you can stream from over NDI that can augment the DDRs in your TriCaster or other types of devices that you have. So, when you see this, this will just come in as one of 4 NDI output channels that you can either send a single file to that can be tally aware. So you can queue it up and then it won't start playing until a clip goes into preview or goes on to program. And you can specify that when you put the clip in it. So it really is incredibly flexible for these types of on the fly. I find an asset, I want to throw it into the show. You can do that with this. These devices also record NDI. So you can set up any of the NDI feeds you have going on your network and record those as well on these systems as an archive. So, if you look at this, what they've really started to do now is taken the entire workflow of asset management. You can have all the things you want for productions. You can use them in pre-production or post-production using any of the Adobe suite or Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve, which has its own set of amazing functions that can be leveraged by the Evo line as well. It also works with cloud systems. So if you want to share files, you can either pull them in from a cloud provider, including things like instances on Amazon, as well as write them out. So this will allow you to do things like back up things that you're recording to a remote system and have that security that you're covered and you won't lose things. But it doesn't end there. What makes this capability, this ability to work with remote drives so powerful is a feature they have in the product called Slingshot. And now what Slingshot does, it provides automation that you can leverage to script what happens to assets when they appear in a location. So you could set up something where either on a scheduled basis, like every night, I want to back everything up to an offsite storage, or on a transactional basis. When this file finishes writing, I want you to copy it to this location. So the power behind that, though, is when you think of using this in a distributed production environment. So if I wanted to cover a conference and I was writing files to the system for each segment of a conference, as soon as those files were written, the system can load them up to something on Amazon. And in a studio in another location, you can have another one of these systems that's looking up at that drive and will automatically pull that updated, that written file down and give people back in the studio the ability to start to work with it. Very, very cool. The other piece, and this is something a lot of us struggle with when we deal with the needs of clients versus the optimal way we will record and capture video. This system can also do transcoding and do it on an automated basis. So when a file is written, you can actually tell the system, transcode it now to this format, which is what I need to give to my client before they leave. So these things can all start to happen automatically. Very, very cool stuff here. I'm just touching on the surface. There's a lot of depth behind this. Uh, so you can get the SNS modules directly from them. You can also get there's I think it's called NDI Remote Storage from NewTek that will give you pretty much an equivalent set of features for this. Cool thing is this actually, given what it does, it starts at around $15,000 for the basic box, which would be the 8 bays with 32 terabytes of storage. You can expand that. So they also have these 16-bay units that can either work as ancillary units that just expand the storage, or they have 16-bay units in total that you could start with. And these obviously are much more expensive. And I realize when I'm talking about these prices, these are really big investments for almost all of us here. But if this is something that your studio could leverage, it could really pay for itself. I mean, it gives you a level of security, a level of automation, a level of responsiveness with building assets, simplifying what it takes to assemble everything you need to assemble for a show. Uh, I can see a lot of cases where this type of system as part of your studio infrastructure could pay for itself, given the right, business drivers for your company. But definitely was excited when we saw this, played out live, and something I think if you're in this space, something you should definitely pay attention to. Now, the other thing that we saw, uh, we got to spend some time at Roland. They have a history in the music space, so everything from amplifiers, keyboards, other things that specifically would be around the music space. But in recent years, they've moved more and more into the video production space, and specifically around hardware switchers and different types of components for hardware. So they have some standard ones, and I'll just touch on them. They have uh, a HD model, which can do up to 8 inputs. They have a UHD model, which can do also 8 inputs, but it gives you not just uh, UHD, but DCI 4K, which I thought was really cool. And on that unit, they also have a region of interest, which can let you set up multiple shots, which are cropped 4K. So they can stream a 1080 production out of the switcher, but using cropped 4K cameras to create multiple shots. This stuff was great, and we were really impressed with it. But there were two products at the lower end that we think could have a real impact for the way some of us guys produce sort of lower personnel streams, where you have one camera person sort of running everything, or you just have a small group that are responsible for taking care of the full production. So the first one is called the V02HD, and it is as simple as what you see here. It has two inputs and a crossbar or cuts. So you can do a T-bar fade between the two, or you can cut between them pressing the buttons. What makes this so interesting to us is the use case. This could be something where you have one cameraman that is running two cameras. One of them is a wide shot, which covers sort of a whole stage, and the other can be a zoomed in focus camera. You can use a device like this in a live production to switch to your live shot, reposition your close up focus camera, switch back to the focus camera, and continue to do that to basically give very detailed coverage of an event with two cameras and one person. And not only that, but if you see the way it's set up here in this picture, you actually have the ability to control which camera is selected via a foot switch. So you wouldn't even have to have your hands on this device in order to work with it. You can simply be using a foot switch and moving the cameras fully focused on the task at hand. This was really great to us, and it also has additional capabilities that can be controlled. If you see off to the side, it can be controlled using an iPad or a phone. So there's more in this than meets the eye, but it's the sort of thing I could easily see people saying, that's a godsend. I can actually now make this type of job affordable to me because I can staff it right. I can just have one camera person and do this and still do a professional grade job with what you want to stream. Definitely something interesting. The other one that we saw, which we really liked, is a 3 input switcher called the VR1HD. And what makes this interesting to us is that this switcher will let you take whatever is being output and send it in as effectively an HD webcam into any streaming software you want to use to stream this, to encode and stream. It actually does the encoding you need sort of in the device, and it really is just acting as an encoder stream and a webcam. So something that would work in a lot of situations that don't require a full large switch in place. But it has some really cool features in it. The first is that it has the mixer right on the front for the audio levels for each of the inputs that you have coming in. So there's two mics in one line. So this gives you control over sort of direct physical control over sound levels. Uh, it also lets you switch between the cameras and sort of manage those two all from one small interface. It has audio effects, which can actually provide everything from sort of compression and reverb and things like that that you'd want. But it also lets you record audio in advance. So you could do things where you wanted to have a sort of an intro musical piece as you fade from black or as you fade out the show at the end. It can let you do those types of things as well. So you can set this up with a lot of sort of podcaster like effects. And this is where we think this is probably really a sweet spot for. If you want to do video podcasting, this device could really be ideal. The other piece to it, though, that is really really cool, is it will do video follow audio. So we're definitely used to audio follow video, where when I switch to an input source, the audio from that source becomes the audio that's being sent out the program. This works the other way around. This means that when somebody starts to speak, it can switch cameras to that person. So you can set up something where you have a table and you can now use this as a auto switcher and focus as a host more on the conversation you want to engender in the production you're doing rather than having to worry about what buttons you're pushing all the time. So we thought that was great, but it's smart enough to know if both people are talking simultaneously. It can do things like split screen, where you'll end up with seeing each person on half the screen sort of centered in there. So some very smart things that are available inside this switcher that we haven't seen in this sort of compact footprint before. So the other thing about this is, from a pricing point of view, this is under $1,500. So we spoke to the folks at Roland, and this is something that we should be able to get in house to actually do a complete review of it. But we just the whole model that this uses and the way it fits so well with video podcasting, which is a big piece of sort of the production space today for people that are live streaming, just doing these interviews. The other piece it could work well with is if you're using something to bring in a remote guest, uh, because it does take HDMI in and can take a computer input, you could actually use the remote guest and do remote interviews with somebody with all the automated switching taking place in here. So again, sort of expanding the local podcast to now more of a streaming program that focuses on interviewing guests. So a lot of different things in here that we think this could be useful for. And we'll definitely try to get this in house and do a show focusing in on exactly how this could work and be set up in a workflow. So, uh, very small footprint, by the way. It is basically the smaller than your traditional computer keyboard. So definitely something that would fit in almost any location you were in. So before we left the show, I got a chance to spend some time with my friend Paul Richards. He's from Stream Geeks, and this is probably a good segue into an event that we have coming up that I've talked about in the past. So for our, for everybody that isn't aware, we are doing a show with at the Stream Geek Summit. We have a workshop there, which is going to be talking about live streaming 101. So it's going to be something where we're going to have this thing set up as how do you get started? What type of gear do you use? How do you keep a program fresh and running, week after week or whatever time frame you want to use your show for. So we think, this could be something that would be great to be at. It's not a vendor show. It's not something where they're going to be pushing products. So there's a lot of great speakers. And hopefully, if you're in the New York City area and can join us here, that would be great. If not, there are still free tickets available for everything going on the main stage and virtual tickets that are also available for recordings of all the workshops after the event is over. So we'd love to see you there. If you come by to the workshop that I'm having, which is I think 9 a.m. on the 8th, that would be great. Just say hello, and we'll carve out some time to talk. So thanks again for spending time with the show. For our next show, I'm really excited. We have Jeffrey Fitzgerald. So Jeff Fitzgerald, better known as Jeff in High Def, uh, great guy. This man knows more about the streaming and production space than probably anybody that I know. And he's doing this as a business. So he understands everything that goes into pulling together productions, doing corporate work, doing event work. So we're going to have a great conversation next week, and I'd love you to join us here for the show. So thanks for spending time with me today, for letting me talk about all the things that were exciting in this at this NAB show. I just want to point out before we leave that I haven't actually used all of these things, so your mileage may vary. I'm not necessarily recommending them. I'm simply recommending that these things looked really interesting. And if you have any feedback, if you guys have been using them or get them at some point, please share that with everybody in the group or on the page. Uh, I'd love to find out more. And again, if you have things that you've been using that we didn't cover here that you think people would like to know about, again, just post a comment and give us a nudge, and we'll start to look at these things as well. So thanks again, everyone, and until next week, take care. Bye.